Kai Maro stood at the edge of the alien marketplace, his eyes wide with curiosity. The planet Zarna was like nothing he'd ever seen before. Strange creatures of all shapes and sizes bustled through the crowded streets, speaking in languages he couldn't understand. The air smelled of spices and something sweet, a far cry from the simple streets of Earth he was used to. Kai was a human exchange student, sent to Zarna as part of a diplomatic program. He was supposed to be studying the alien culture, learning their history, their ways, and their advanced technologies. But right now, he just wanted to find his way back to the safety of his dorm. As he wandered through the market, he tried to make sense of the crowd. The Zarnans were tall, with silvery skin and sharp features. Some had large, expressive eyes, while others had long, flowing antennae. Kai had barely gotten used to their appearance, let alone their customs. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he knew it wasn't supposed to be a fight. Suddenly, the crowd parted. A loud shout rang out, followed by the sound of weapons clashing. Kai froze. In the center of the commotion, he saw a young alien woman surrounded by armed figures. She wore a veil over her face, but there was something about her posture, something regal, that caught Kai's attention. He didn't know why, but he knew she was important. The rebels had cornered her. Kai could see the fear in the princess's eyes as she tried to back away from the advancing figures. The rebels, with their fierce, wild expressions, didn't seem to care who they hurt. In that moment, Kai's instincts took over. He wasn't a soldier, not by any stretch of the imagination, but he had learned how to think fast. With his heart racing, Kai grabbed a nearby crate, threw it into the path of the rebels, and knocked one of them off balance. The others turned to look, and in the brief distraction, the princess bolted. She ran toward him, and without thinking, Kai stepped in front of her, pushing her out of the line of fire. They ran together through the maze of the market, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. Kai didn't know where he was going, but he had to keep moving. The princess didn't say a word, but he could feel the urgency in her every step. As they turned a corner, they came upon a small alleyway. Kai shoved the princess behind a stack of crates and pressed his back against the wall, trying to catch his breath. They both listened to the footsteps of the rebels growing faint in the distance. After a few moments, Kai dared to peek around the corner. The street was clear. The princess, still breathing heavily, stepped out from behind the crates. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she spoke. "You saved me," she said, her voice calm but filled with gratitude. Kai blinked, not sure how to respond. He had no idea who she was, but somehow he'd just saved the princess of Zarna. "You're welcome," Kai said, still processing everything. "I think we should get you somewhere safe." The princess nodded, and they began walking toward the nearest safe house. What had started as an ordinary day was now the beginning of something he never could have imagined. Little did Kai know, this moment would change his life forever. After the chaos in the marketplace, Kai and the princess, whose name was Lyra, found a quiet corner of the palace where they could talk. Kai hadn't expected to end up here, surrounded by royal guards and stunning alien architecture. The walls were made of smooth, translucent stone that shimmered in the light, and soft, glowing plants adorned the hallways. He couldn't help but be amazed at the beauty of it all. The palace was like a fortress, but it felt strangely welcoming. Despite her royal surroundings, Lyra seemed out of place. She had been raised to be the ruler of Zarna, but Kai could see the weariness in her eyes. Her people were suffering, and she was stuck in the middle of it all. "I should thank you for saving me," Lyra said as they walked down one of the grand halls. Her voice was soft but firm, the voice of someone who had seen much more than a young woman should. "I don't know how to repay you." Kai shrugged. "I just did what anyone would do. Besides, I don't even know who you are, other than being in danger." Lyra smiled slightly, but there was no joy in it. "I'm the princess of Zarna," she said, her tone carrying a weight of responsibility. "But I'm not sure that matters anymore. Our people are divided. The rebels want me dead, and my family is under constant threat. Kai blinked in surprise. You mean, the rebels were after you? The ones who attacked us? Liara nodded. Yes, they want to overthrow my family. But it's not just about power. There are deep divisions in our society, and the rebellion has grown more dangerous than anyone expected. She stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes locking with his. And now, you're part of it. Whether you like it or not, you're involved in this fight. Kai wasn't sure how to respond. He had never expected to be thrown into anything like this. He was just a student, trying to learn about a different culture, not get caught up in a war. I didn't ask for this, Kai said quietly. But I don't want to see people hurt. I don't know what I can do. Liara studied him for a long moment before speaking again. Maybe you're exactly what we need. You're not from here. You don't have the biases that the Zarnans do. You can see things with fresh eyes. I've been raised to see everything as my duty. But sometimes, I wonder if there's another way. Kay's heart raced at her words. He had never thought of himself as anything special. He was just a student. But now, Liara was asking for his help. She needed him, and somehow, he couldn't turn away. I don't know if I'm the right person for this, Kai said, his voice uncertain. But I'll try. If I can help, I will. Liara nodded, her expression softening. Thank you, Kai. Your help means more than you know. They continued their walk through the palace, but the weight of what had just been said hung heavy in the air. Kai had no idea what he had just agreed to, but one thing was clear. His life was no longer just about learning. It was about survival, and about helping someone who had become more than just a princess to him. She was now his responsibility. The days after their escape from the marketplace felt like a blur. The palace was more secure than any place Kai had ever been, but it didn't provide the comfort he expected. Liara's family had been in hiding for months, always one step ahead of the rebels, but there was no guarantee of safety. The attack on the marketplace was proof that the rebels were getting bolder. Kai couldn't shake the feeling that danger was always lurking just out of sight. He'd expected a peaceful life as an exchange student, but now he was in the middle of a rebellion, standing next to the princess of a planet at war. One afternoon, Kai was in the royal library, trying to get a little peace and quiet, when an alarm suddenly blared through the halls. The sound was loud and sharp, sending a wave of tension through his body. He rushed out of the library, his heart pounding. He found Liara already surrounded by guards, her face tense. What's happening? Kai asked, rushing to her side. Rebels, Liara said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. They found us. Kay's stomach twisted. He had hoped they would have more time. But it seemed like the rebels were closing in faster than anyone anticipated. Liara's guards moved quickly, preparing for the worst. Kai was ushered into a hidden chamber by one of them, but he refused to just sit and wait. He had seen what those rebels were capable of. He wasn't going to hide while people risked their lives for him. I need to help, he said, his voice firm. One of the guards hesitated. You're a human, not a soldier. It's too dangerous. But Kai wasn't about to listen. I've already been in danger once, and I survived. I'm not going to sit here and do nothing. The guard finally relented, and with a nod, he handed Kai a small blaster. It wasn't much, but it would help him defend himself. Stay close to the princess, he said. If you want to help, that's your job. Kai nodded, determined. He found Liara in the center of the chaos, surrounded by guards as they prepared to defend the palace. The rebels had breached the outer walls, and their voices echoed through the halls. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to capture or kill. Kai stood beside Liara, gripping the blaster tightly. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also a determination there, one he admired. She wasn't going to back down. They won't get you, Kai said, more to reassure himself than anything else. Liara gave him a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. We'll see. The palace shook as the rebels' weapons pounded against the walls. Kai's nerves were on edge, but he held his ground, ready to protect the princess if it came to that. But as the rebels neared, something strange happened. The guards began to retreat, one by one, and Kai could see the worry in their faces. "It's a trap," Liara said suddenly, her voice low. "They've set us up. We've been betrayed." Kai's heart raced. He had no idea who could have betrayed them, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was getting out alive. Before he could react, the door to the chamber burst open, and armed rebels stormed in. Kai raised the blaster, but the princess was already moving. She acted quickly, leading Kai through the hidden passageways that ran beneath the palace. As they sprinted down narrow tunnels, the sound of the battle faded behind them, but the threat was far from over. Kai's heart pounded as they made their way deeper into the palace's underbelly. He didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was certain: this wasn't over. The rebellion's wrath had just begun, and they were all caught in its storm. The escape from the rebels had been only the beginning. Kai and Liara, now deeper in the palace's hidden tunnels, moved quickly but quietly. The walls were cold and damp, the air thick with the smell of old stone. Kai was beginning to realize just how complex this palace was. There were places here he would never have guessed existed, places that only a few knew about. It was clear that the royal family had gone to great lengths to protect themselves from enemies. But now it wasn't enough. The rebels were inside the palace, and they weren't leaving without a fight. The betrayal Liara had spoken of hung heavily in the air, but no one knew who the traitors were. The only thing that was certain was that they were running out of time. "Where are we going?" Kai asked, his voice echoing slightly as they moved through the tunnels. Liara glanced over her shoulder at him, her face set with determination. "To the safe house. We'll regroup and figure out our next move. I'll need to speak with my most trusted advisors." But Kai started, but he was interrupted by Liara's sudden stop. She raised a hand, signaling for silence. The hairs on the back of Kai's neck stood up. He couldn't hear anything, but something about the air felt off. Liara's eyes darted to the tunnel entrance ahead, her expression tense. "Stay close," she whispered, pulling out a small communication device from her belt. She spoke softly into it, but Kai could tell it wasn't just a normal message. She was alerting someone who could help them. A few minutes passed, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Liara turned back to Kai. "We've been discovered," she said, her voice low but steady. "We can't stay here. We need to get out of these tunnels and into the city. I need you to do something for me." Kai nodded. "What do you need me to do?" Liara hesitated for a moment, her gaze softening. "I need you to go to the rebel camp. Find out who is behind this. I can't trust anyone here anymore, but you. Your outsider's perspective might give you a chance to find answers." Kai blinked in surprise. "You want me to go into the rebel camp?" His voice was a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Are you sure? I'm just a student. I don't know how to do anything like this." "You're more capable than you realize," Liara replied. "You've already proven that. And you're not alone. I'll give you everything you need to make it happen. You'll have help on the outside, and I'll be right behind you, even if from a distance. But you'll have to be careful. The rebels don't trust anyone. If they find out you're there to spy, it won't end well." Kai took a deep breath, trying to push the fear that was rising in his chest down. He wasn't a soldier, and he had no experience with missions like this. But Liara trusted him. And somehow, that meant everything. "I'll do it," Kai said firmly. "I'll find out who's behind this. I won't let you down." Liara smiled at him, a look of gratitude and hope in her eyes. "I know you won't." With that, she handed him a small, sleek device. "This will help you communicate with me," she said. "Use it when you have the information. But only when you're sure. And be careful. Trust no one." Kai took the device, nodding. He wasn't sure what kind of danger he was walking into, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't back out now. The princess had placed her trust in him, and he was going to do everything in his power to keep her and her people safe. As they parted ways, the weight of the mission hung heavily on Kay's shoulders. He was about to enter enemy territory, but the question lingered in his mind. Could he trust the people who had helped him so far, or was he walking straight into another trap? The answers would have to wait until he was inside the rebel camp. Kai had never felt more out of place in his life. His heart raced as he moved through the dark alleyways of Zarna's capital, doing his best to blend in with the shadows. Every step was a risk. He was walking into the heart of enemy territory, trying to find answers about the betrayal that threatened to tear the planet apart. The rebels, the ones responsible for attacking the palace and putting Lyra's life at risk, had no reason to trust a human like him. But he had no choice. He had to learn what they were planning. The mission seemed impossible, but Lyra had given him no other option. She had armed him with information and the communication device, but even with that, the odds felt stacked against him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the moment he stepped into the rebel camp, he might never make it out again. Kai approached the rebel camp cautiously, his mind racing. He had memorized the layout of the area from the intelligence Lyra had provided, but he knew the real challenge was going to be blending in. The rebels weren't exactly known for their hospitality, especially toward outsiders. The camp was a chaotic mix of tents, old buildings, and vehicles strewn across an abandoned industrial site. The air smelled of smoke and oil, and the ground was littered with debris. Kai stuck to the edges, keeping to the shadows as best as he could. His eyes scanned every corner, looking for any signs of movement. The last thing he wanted was to be caught. He found a small group of rebels gathered near a fire, speaking in low voices. Kai knew he needed to get closer, but doing so meant risking exposure. He could hear their words, snippets of their plans for Zarna, but he couldn't make out enough to be sure of anything. Just then, a voice called out from behind him, startling him. "Don't move." Kai froze, his heart skipping a beat. He turned slowly to find a tall woman with short, dark hair standing behind him, her gun aimed directly at him. She was dressed in the same rebel clothing as the others, her expression unreadable. I'm not with them," Kai said quickly, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "I'm just here to—" "Save your lies, human," the woman interrupted, her voice harsh. "You're either here to spy, or you're lost. Either way, you won't make it out without an answer." Kai took a step back, but the woman didn't lower her weapon. He could feel the tension in the air. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. But before he could react, the woman's face softened slightly. "Wait," she said, lowering the gun just enough to show she wasn't going to shoot. "You're not just some soldier, are you? I know who you are." Kai blinked, confused. "What do you mean? Who am I?" "I'm Vyra," the woman said, her eyes scanning him closely. "I used to be part of the Royal Guard, before I realized how much of the story we weren't told. You're the human who saved Lyra, aren't you?" Kay's mind raced. This was unexpected. "I didn't know she had so many enemies." Vera shook her head. "It's not just the rebels, boy. It's much deeper than that. Your princess isn't the only one in danger. The real enemy is within her own family." Kai felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Vera stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The rebellion is just a distraction. There's a faction within the royal family itself, plotting to take control. They're the ones pulling the strings, using the rebels as pawns. If you really want answers, you'll need to trust me." Kai stared at her, his mind reeling. Was this some kind of trick? But the intensity in Vera's eyes told him she wasn't lying. If what she was saying was true, everything he'd believed about the rebellion and the palace was wrong. His mission had just gotten more complicated. "What do you want from me?" Kai asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I want you to help me stop them," Vera said, a fire in her eyes. "You have a connection to the princess, and they'll never expect you to work with me. Together, we can expose the truth and save Zarna from tearing itself apart. Kay's head spun. This wasn't what he'd signed up for, but there was no turning back now. He had to choose whether to trust Vyra and take on a far bigger role in this conflict than he ever imagined, or walk away and risk losing everything. With a deep breath, Kai made his decision. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll help you. But we do this together." Vera nodded, her face breaking into a small, knowing smile. "Good. It's time to end this." As they turned and disappeared into the shadows, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that the true fight was just beginning. Kai had no idea what he was getting into when he agreed to work with Vyra. The rebel camp, once a place of fear, now felt strangely like an ally's hideout. Despite his growing unease, he couldn't ignore the truth in Vera's words. The royal family was divided. Lyara was in danger, but the threat was bigger than he had ever imagined. The very people who should have been protecting her might be the ones plotting her downfall. Vyra led him through the labyrinth of the rebel camp, deeper into its heart. The camp had once been a sanctuary for freedom fighters, but now it felt like a ticking time bomb, with tensions running high. There were whispers of betrayal everywhere, on both sides. Vyra had introduced him to a small group of rebels who had once been loyal to the royal family. They were now working in the shadows to uncover the truth. They all looked like hardened fighters, with worn-out clothing and eyes that had seen too much. But there was something different about them. Something that made Kai feel that maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. "Here," Vera said, stopping at a small tent on the edge of the camp. She glanced around before entering. "This is where we meet with our allies. Don't trust anyone outside of this group." Kai nodded. The weight of the situation was heavy on his shoulders. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a part of a rebellion, tangled in a web of lies and betrayals that could destroy a planet. The world around him was no longer a classroom, but a battlefield. Inside the tent, Vera introduced him to the others. Jarek, a former royal guard, Elise, a tech expert, and Kalen, a strategist who had seen countless battles. They had all been part of the royal guard or palace security before they realized something was wrong with the royal family. Now, they were on the run, trying to expose the truth about the faction within the palace. Jarek, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, looked Kai over with a cold gaze. "So, you're the human who saved Lyara?" he asked. Kai nodded, not sure how else to respond. Ellis, who had short, messy hair and sharp eyes, smiled slightly. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that." Kellen, the strategist, seemed deep in thought. "Vera trusts you, so that's a start. But you've got to understand one thing. If we fail, everyone dies. This is bigger than us, and if you're not ready for that, then you need to walk away now." The room went silent. Kai could feel the weight of Kalen's words pressing down on him. This wasn't just about saving Lyara anymore. It was about saving Zarna. And the consequences of failure would be catastrophic. "I understand," Kai said, his voice steady. "I'm in." Vyra nodded. "Good. We need you to get close to the people inside the palace, the ones who are working against us. We have intel that the head of the royal guard is part of the faction. We need proof, something we can use to expose them to the public." Cade's heart raced. The head of the royal guard. That was someone Lyra trusted. He couldn't imagine how much that betrayal must hurt. "We can get you into the palace," Vera continued. "But it won't be easy. You'll need to play their game, gain their trust, and find a way to get us that proof. If they know you're with us, they'll kill you on sight." Kai clenched his fists, determination settling in his chest. He wasn't going to back down. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to fail now. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice firm. Vyra smiled, her expression one of approval. "I knew you'd say that. But remember, this isn't just a mission. It's your life. It's Lyra's life. And it's the future of Zarna. Don't forget what's at stake." Kai nodded, his mind already racing with plans. He had to be careful. He had to stay one step ahead of the people who wanted to destroy Lyra and take control of the planet. But more than anything, he had to find the truth, no matter what the cost. As he left the tent, his mind was filled with a mix of fear and determination. The road ahead was uncertain, and the risks were enormous. But he had made his choice. There was no turning back now. Kai's heart raced as he walked through the familiar halls of the palace, but this time it felt different. Everything seemed colder, more distant, like the walls themselves were watching him. He was back inside the very place that had once felt like a dream, like a fantasy where he had learned about alien cultures, where he had grown close to the princess. Now it felt like a cage. Liara had been left in the dark. She still had no idea what was happening, no idea about the rebellion inside her own family. But Kai had to keep up the act. He had to blend in, pretend he was just another loyal student in the royal household. But there was no loyalty left in this place, only lies and betrayals. Kai had agreed to work with Vyra and the rebels, and he had learned something in the last few days. Nothing was as simple as it seemed. His mission was no longer just about finding the traitors. It was about uncovering a conspiracy that ran deeper than he could have imagined. The royal guard, the ones sworn to protect the princess, were not just working for the kingdom. They were working for someone who wanted to control everything. Kai had received word that he had to meet with General Varon, the head of the royal guard. The very man who, according to the rebels, was behind the betrayal. General Varon was a tall, intimidating figure who had always been seen as a symbol of strength and loyalty. If he was truly a traitor, then nothing in the palace could be trusted. Kai swallowed his fear as he approached the general's office. His fingers brushed against the cold marble walls, and for a moment, he thought about turning back. But he had come this far. He had made promises he couldn't break. The door to the general's office was already open when Kai reached it. Inside, Varon stood at a large desk, looking over some documents. His back was to the door, but Kai knew he had been expecting him. "Ah, the human student," Varon said, his deep voice smooth and calm. "Come in, Kai. I've been waiting for you." Kai stepped inside, trying not to show the nerves in his chest. "General Varon." "Sir," he greeted, keeping his voice steady. Varon turned around slowly, a small smile on his face. "You've become quite the topic of conversation around here, Kai. People are impressed by how well you've adapted. The princess has spoken highly of you." Kai smiled weakly. He had heard rumors about how the general had always been close to Lyra's family, but he had no idea how deep that loyalty ran. Now he wasn't sure what to believe. "I've been trying to learn as much as I can," Kai said, trying to sound casual. "The palace is very different from Earth, and I want to help however I can." Varon nodded, his gaze sharp. "I've been watching you, Kai, and I believe you can be of great use to us." Kai's breath caught in his throat. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he would learn the truth about General Varon's involvement in the rebellion. He took a step forward, trying to mask his fear. "What do you mean, sir?" Varon's smile grew, but there was something chilling about it. "I mean, you're in a unique position. The princess trusts you. You've earned the right to be part of something bigger than yourself. I want you to join us, Kai. We could use someone like you." Kai's mind spun. His instincts screamed at him to run, to get out of this room before things went further. But he couldn't back down now. He had to stay calm. I don't know if I understand, sir," Kai said, his voice sounding steadier than he felt. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Varon walked closer, his eyes never leaving Kai's. "We want you to spy on the princess. We want you to gather information on her plans, her thoughts, her alliances. She's too weak to leave this planet. She's too soft. She doesn't have the strength to make the tough decisions." Kai's stomach twisted. This was worse than he had imagined. The general was offering him a role in a coup, in a plan that would destroy everything Lyra cared about. He was being asked to betray her. I can't do that." Kai said, his voice shaky but firm. I can't betray her. She's trusting me. Veron's expression hardened, and for a moment, the kind smile vanished. Then you'll be a problem, Kai. And problems are easily removed. Kai's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show fear. Instead, he met Veron's gaze with determination. You won't get away with this. Veron chuckled softly, but there was no warmth in it. We'll see about that. As Kai turned to leave, he knew things had just gotten far more dangerous. The general was playing a dangerous game, and if Kai didn't get the proof he needed soon, Lyara's life and the future of Zarna would be in jeopardy. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. Kai's footsteps echoed through the empty hallways as he hurried back to his quarters. The meeting with General Veron had shaken him to his core. The man had openly admitted to planning a coup, using Lyra as a puppet and replacing her with someone more fit to rule. It was a terrifying thought. Lyra, the princess he had come to care for deeply, was nothing like the person Veron described. She was kind, intelligent, and determined to lead Zarna into a better future, not let it fall into the hands of power-hungry traitors. Kai's mind raced as he made his way to the small, dimly lit room he had been staying in. The walls felt closer now, the air thick with the weight of what he had learned. He had always known there were things happening behind the scenes, but now that he had been thrust into the heart of the conspiracy, it was impossible to ignore the danger. He couldn't stay in the palace any longer. Veron was watching him, and it was only a matter of time before the general would figure out that Kai was no longer on his side. He needed to gather more information, expose the truth, and find a way to warn Lyra before it was too late. Kai sat on the edge of the bed, his thoughts racing. He pulled out the small communication device that Vera had given him. His fingers hovered over the buttons, but a sense of hesitation gripped him. What if he was too late? What if everything he had worked for had already crumbled? Just as he was about to send a message to Vera, a soft knock on the door startled him. He quickly slipped the device back into his pocket, wiping his sweaty palms on his pants. Was it Veron? Had he been discovered already? Come in, Kai called, trying to sound casual. The door creaked open, and to his surprise, it was not a guard or the general standing there. It was Lyra. Kai, I need to talk to you, she said, her voice soft but serious. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. Kai stood quickly, startled by her presence. Princess. No need for titles, she interrupted, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a chill through him. Something is wrong, Kai. I can feel it. You're hiding something from me. Kai opened his mouth, but the words got stuck in his throat. He had promised to protect her, to keep her safe, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth, not yet. It was too dangerous. I'm not hiding anything, Kai said quickly. Everything is fine. Lyra didn't buy it. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving him. I know you're not telling me everything. You've been acting strange, like you're torn between two sides. I need to know what's really going on. Kai's heart pounded in his chest. He knew this moment would come, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Lyra was too sharp, too perceptive. He couldn't lie to her. Not like this. I can't tell you everything, Lyra, Kai said, his voice low. But I will tell you this. You're in danger. The palace is full of enemies, and General Veron is one of them. Lyra's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Veron has always been loyal to my family. I wish that were true, Kai said, shaking his head. But he's not. He's been planning to overthrow you, to take control of the throne. I'm trying to stop him. But I can't do it alone. Lyra's face was a mask of disbelief, her expression flickering between confusion and anger. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I didn't know who I could trust, Kai admitted, his voice tight. I'm still trying to figure out who the real enemies are, but I know I can't let Veron win. He'll destroy everything you've worked for. Lyara's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You've been risking everything to help me, haven't you?" Kai nodded. "I'm not going to stop. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." A silence stretched between them as Lyara took in his words. Finally, she nodded, determination filling her eyes. "Then we'll stop him together," she said, her voice steady. "You don't have to do this alone. We have to fight back, Kai." Kai felt a rush of relief wash over him. Lyara had always been strong, but now she was ready to take the fight to the heart of the conspiracy. He could see it in her eyes. She was no longer the helpless princess in need of saving. She was a leader, ready to stand up for what was right. "Are you sure?" Kai asked, his voice filled with concern. "It's dangerous. We're going up against the most powerful people in the palace." Lyara smiled, her face fierce with resolve. "I've been trained for this my whole life. I may not have the strength of a soldier, but I have something they'll never understand. I have the will to fight for what's right." Kai's heart swelled with pride as he looked at her. Together, they could defeat the traitors, expose the truth, and save Zarna. The battle ahead would be hard, but they weren't alone anymore. "We'll do this," he said, his voice steady. Together, the plan was set, and there was no turning back. Kai and Lyra stood together in the palace garden, the moonlight casting long shadows over the stone paths. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their mission pressing down on both of them. They had to move quickly. Varen's plan to take over Zarna was already in motion, and every minute they wasted brought them closer to disaster. "We can't wait any longer," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to act before Varen can rally his supporters." Kai nodded, his mind racing. They had spent the last few days gathering intel, carefully piecing together the puzzle of the conspiracy within the royal family. Vera's team of rebels had been working hard to uncover the names of those loyal to Varen, and now it was time to use that information. The palace guards, the generals, even a few of Lyra's closest advisors had been revealed as part of the faction that wanted to take over the throne. They were all playing a dangerous game of power, and Lyra was the pawn they planned to sacrifice. Kai couldn't stand the thought of it. He had to protect her, and he would do anything to make sure she stayed safe. "Do you have everything ready?" Kai asked, his voice low as he scanned the garden, ensuring no one was listening. Lyra reached into the folds of her royal gown and pulled out a small silver device. "This is the communication device that connects us to the rebels. We'll need it to coordinate the final strike. Vera and the others are waiting for our signal." Kai took the device from her, his fingers brushing against hers for a moment. There was a spark of something between them, something that had grown stronger with each passing day. He had come to care for Lyra more than he had ever expected. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She was his ally, his friend, and someone he was willing to fight for, no matter the cost. "We'll make it work," he said, his voice filled with determination. But even as he spoke, doubts began to creep into his mind. Was this the right decision? They were about to risk everything, and if they failed, Zarna could fall into chaos. Varen was a master manipulator. He had the support of the royal guard and many others who held power in the palace. Could Kai and Lyra really bring him down? Lyra seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped closer to him, her expression softening. "I know you're scared. I am too. But we can't let fear stop us. If we don't act now, the kingdom will be lost. I trust you, Kai." Her words warmed his heart, and for a moment, all the fear and doubt seemed to vanish. She trusted him. That was all that mattered. They had already come this far together. Now, they just had to finish what they started. "We'll do it," Kai said, his voice steady. "But we have to be smart. Varen won't go down easily." Lyra nodded. "I know. That's why we need to take him by surprise. He thinks we're weak. We can use that against him." Kai smiled, impressed by her resolve. She had grown so much since the day they first met. The shy, uncertain princess was gone, replaced by a leader who was ready to fight for her people. He was proud to stand by her side. As they moved towards the palace, the first signs of the storm began to show. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, a sign of the coming battle. The wind picked up, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Everything was about to change. Inside the palace, the halls were silent, but beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. The loyalists were already preparing for the final confrontation, unaware that Liara and Kai had outsmarted them. The communication device would send the signal, and the rebels would strike. But it had to be perfect. If anything went wrong, it would mean disaster. Liara stopped at the door to the royal chambers and turned to Kai. "Are you ready?" Kai met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. Ready. With a deep breath, Liara nodded, and together, they stepped into the heart of the palace. They were about to face the fight of their lives. But they had something no one else had, each other. And together, they would fight to the very end. The palace trembled as the first blasts of gunfire echoed through the halls. The rebellion had begun. Kai and Liara stood in the middle of the grand corridor, the sound of battle growing louder by the second. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment that would decide the fate of Zarna. "We have to move fast," Liara said, her voice low but filled with authority. "Verum can't know we're coming for him. We can't let him rally his supporters." Kai nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never imagined his life would come to this, fighting inside the very palace he had once admired. But he wasn't just fighting for Zarna anymore. He was fighting for Liara, for her future, and for the truth. There was no turning back. The rebels, led by Vera, had already breached the outer defenses of the palace. The guards loyal to Veron were in disarray, but the general was still a powerful threat. They had to find him before he could organize a counterattack. Kai and Liara moved swiftly through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the tense silence that followed the chaos of the initial assault. "This way," Liara whispered, pulling Kai toward a hidden passageway she had discovered years ago. It led to the royal chambers, where Veron was most likely hiding. The walls around them felt heavy with history, but in this moment, it was the future of Zarna that mattered. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a squad of royal guards. The men immediately raised their weapons, their eyes cold and hard. Kai's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't hesitate. Liara stepped forward, her posture regal and strong, despite the situation. "Step aside," she ordered, her voice commanding. "I am the princess, and I demand to speak with General Veron." The guards hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. They had sworn an oath to protect the royal family, but now they were caught between loyalty to Veron and their duty to Lara. Kai could see the uncertainty in their eyes, but he knew they had no choice but to act quickly. One of the guards, a tall man with dark hair, took a step forward. "We can't let you pass. The general's orders." Before he could finish, Liara raised her hand, a signal that caught the others off guard. In one swift movement, she disabled the guard's weapon with a hidden device on her wrist. Kai followed her lead, taking down the other guards with precise, quick actions. The room fell silent. "We're not your enemies," Liara said, her voice filled with both compassion and strength. "But if you stand in our way, we won't hesitate to fight back." The guards, realizing they had no choice but to side with the truth, dropped their weapons and stepped aside. Liara and Kai continued down the corridor, their mission now clearer than ever. The royal chambers lay just ahead. The final confrontation with General Veron was near, and they could feel the weight of what was to come. As they reached the door, Lara paused, her hand resting on the handle. "This is it," she whispered. "Once we open that door, there's no turning back." Kai looked at her, his eyes filled with resolve. "We've come this far together. We'll finish it together." Liara nodded, and together, They pushed the door open. Inside, General Varen stood at a large table, surrounded by maps and plans for the future of Zarna. He didn't seem surprised to see them. "I knew you would come," Varen said, his voice calm but full of dark amusement. "But it's too late. The rebellion is already over." "We'll see about that," Kai said, stepping forward. Varen's eyes narrowed. "You think you can stop me? I have the loyalty of the entire Royal Guard. You're nothing but a boy playing at being a hero." "I'm not just a boy," Kai said, his voice steady. "I'm the one who will stop you." With a sudden, sharp motion, Lyra activated the device in her hand. The room flickered with light, and the power grid that controlled the palace's security went dark. The guards outside scrambled, but the rebels were already making their move. Varen's eyes widened as the realization hit him. You've planned this." Lyra stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "It's over, Varen. You've betrayed my family, and you've betrayed Zarna. But this ends now." The general's face twisted in anger. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I'm the only one who can save this planet from destruction. You're weak, princess. You always have been." Lyra's eyes burned with fury, but she stood tall. "No, you're the one who's weak. You wanted power, but I wanted to protect my people. And I will." With one final decisive move, Lyra pressed a hidden button on the table, sending a signal to the rebels outside. The palace shook with the sound of rebellion, and Varen's supporters began to surrender. It was over. Kai looked at Lyra, his heart swelling with pride. They had done it. They had saved Zarna. Together, they had won.